when I am busy. So I'm not able to go on there regularly. Although, whenever I get a chance, and I'm free, yeah, I'd like to go on there. I would. And anyway, because I had a good time. But nonetheless, Jason Whitlock, journalist, actual real guy that got in the nitty and gritty over the years, and then he ended up with ESPN on Pardon the Interruption, Speak for Yourself with Colin Cowherd, all these.
The Amazon Prime broadcast of the Indiana Fever's game against the Atlanta Dream generated significant backlash for the way it framed Caitlin Clark's performance. Viewers who tuned in during the first 5 minutes found the coverage focused almost entirely on criticizing Clark rather than previewing the contest. The pregame segment dedicated meaningful time to Angel Reese hype footage before pivoting into extended analysis of Clark's defensive limitations. Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston were not featured in any substantive pregame context, nor were Atlanta players like Alicia Gray or Ryan Howard, who both struggled on the night. The more striking element of the broadcast was what it chose not to say. Clark turned in what many observers described as the strongest defensive performance of her professional career in that game. She locked down Tina Charles, came away with a block, and was repeatedly left in isolation by her own defensive scheme rather than receiving help. Rotations.
All these shows, right? And now he's over doing Fearless on Blaze TV, and he simulcasts that show, or that show's on YouTube as well. Well, something interesting is going on. Last night, in my reaction to the game, I threw this out there because Klay Thompson's father, now in case you don't know, Klay Thompson's father is Michael Thompson. He played for the Los.
None of that registered in the halftime segment. The broadcast used that time instead to diagram how Clark could theoretically play better defense, treating it as an instructional exercise, while ignoring the actual defensive performance she had just delivered in the first half. The disconnect between the broadcast narrative and the on-court reality was stark enough to draw widespread attention. The implication threads running through the coverage went in multiple directions. Clark was difficult to coach. Another, more softly, gestured towards teammate friction. Neither was stated outright, but the framing was deliberate enough that the implications registered clearly.
Thompson's father is Michael Thompson. He played for the Los Angeles Lakers. He won 2 world titles with the Lakers. And he is in media in Los Angeles. ESPN Los Angeles. He's also part of the broadcast team for the Lakers. And yesterday afternoon before the game, he put out, I'm hearing from a reliable source, the Fever don't want Caitlin no more. Sparks.
The broader pregame and halftime structure amounted to character framing disguised as analysis. What followed, the game amplified the frustration. Indiana won. The narrative of a troubled, dysfunctional Clark situation did not prompt any visible correction or retraction from the outlets that had pushed it most aggressively. The coverage simply moved on. That absence of accountability has become its own talking point. With the argument where character work was done regardless of outcome, and winning did not undo it. The media cycle around Clark follows a recognizable pattern.
No more. Sparks, go get her now. And it's like, wow, okay, that's pretty interesting. That somebody that has, he also, by the way, has a radio show out there. And it, like I said, it's on ESPN Los Angeles. So he puts this out there. Earlier this morning, Jason Whitlock, The Indiana Fever are planning to ship Caitlin Clark to the Los Angeles Sparks.
There is a construction phase where a player is elevated, and a deconstruction phase where the same outlets that built the narrative begin chipping at it. The current moment sits clearly in the second phase. What makes it more complicated is the alignment problem it creates for commentators. Taking a measured position on Clark, one that neither attacks nor uncritically defends, has become difficult to maintain publicly because the discourse has sorted itself into visible camps with reputational associations on each side. The click incentive is the operating logic underneath all of it. Straightforward. Praise of Clark's performance. Slinger generates the same engagement it once did.
I expect UCLA coach Corey Close to be the head coach of the Sparks. Wow. Okay. I was like, wait a minute, what is happening here? In fact, I just said, Jason, do not play with my emotions, man. What is going on? We all would like to know what is going on here. So I said, you know what? We're just going to do a reaction because this is from Jason Whitlock's show.
What generates traffic is conflict. And the most available conflict is between Clark and her coaching staff. That framing, whether or not it reflects reality, is what the incentive structure rewards. Stephanie White becomes a convenient target in this environment, not necessarily because the criticism is accurate, but because attaching her name to a sabotage narrative produces results algorithmically. That said, the front office situation is treated as a separate question. The concerns around organizational decision-making carry more substance in certain analyses than the coaching criticism does, and those two threads are not always distinguished carefully in coverage that treats them as the same story. Olivia Miles and Paige Buchers entered the conversation as comparative reference points.
We're just going to do a reaction because this is from Jason Whitlock's show today, where he lays all of this out and he's done some digging. And this is interesting. And what I will say is, if the NBA is involved here, if Adam Silver is involved here, if you look at the NBA's history of getting biggest stars they can to LA, this makes all the sense in the world. Especially when you consider, and it's...
Both were acknowledged as highly skilled players. The argument being made is that Clark's particular combination of technical ability and competitive mentality places her in a category that the current media framing actively resists engaging with honestly, because honest engagement with her actual performance does not serve the narrative that drives engagement. The broadcast in question aired on Prime without a post-game segment, as the network moved directly to another game. That meant there was no closing opportunity to revisit or balance what had been said earlier. The league, which retains some influence over how broadcast partners frame their coverage, has not addressed the disparity between the on-court reality and the narrative that surrounded it. Trade speculation around Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever has reached a new level of intensity, with two credible media figures now publicly reporting that the organization is moving toward dealing her to the Los Angeles Sparks.
Obvious in front of our eyeballs that the Indiana Fever do not know how to handle the stardom of Caitlin Clark, the fandom that is the Caitlin Clark fandom. They can't deal with it. They can't handle it. I mean, they're having a PR nightmare. Everything else is everybody else's fault. No, it's not. It's on.
The first signal came from Michael Thompson, longtime ESPN Los Angeles personality and former Los Angeles Lakers player. Thompson posted that a reliable source had told him the Fever no longer want Clark and urged the Sparks to pursue her immediately. Thompson is not a social media commentator operating outside the mainstream. He has deep sports media roots in Los Angeles and has been part of the Lakers broadcast infrastructure for years. The second report came from Jason Whitlock, a journalist with roughly 3 decades of experience across outlets, including the Kansas City Star, ESPN, and his current platform Fearless on Blaze TV. Whitlock stated directly that the Indiana Fever are planning to ship Clark to Los Angeles and further identified Oakland coach Corey Close as the likely incoming head coach of the Sparks. Close recently appeared on a women's sports podcast, speaking favorably about Clark and how she believes a player of Clark's stature should be managed. Comments that, in retrospect, carry additional significance given the timing.
Everything else is everybody else's fault. No, it's not. It's on you guys. Y'all can hate channels like me all you want. I mean, imagine that you're upset that people are talking about your club. Can you imagine Philly, New York, LA, them a sports franchise reacting that way? They'd laugh them out of town. Let's listen to this.
I think the wheels are in motion. We're looking at Luka.
The theory Whitlock laid out goes further than a simple roster move. His argument is that the decision to move Clark may have been made as far back as the end of her rookie season, once the Fever organization recognized it was not equipped to manage the commercial and cultural weight of her stardom. The Herb Simon ownership group, which also runs the Indiana Pacers, was framed as treating the Fever as a secondary concern, a charitable side operation rather than a franchise built to compete. When Clark arrived and transformed the league's visibility overnight, the organization allegedly concluded that Los Angeles was the appropriate market to maximize what she represents for the WNBA as a whole. The hiring of Stephanie White is presented within this framework as a calculated buffer. White carries genuine Indiana credibility, a Purdue national championship, deep local ties, a playing history with the Fever, and could theoretically absorb some of the public backlash that would follow a Clark trade.
With makes and misses. Like, over the course of a season, if you're losing games, and if you guys agree with what I'm saying, please subscribe. We have been trying to get to 59.3K for like a month. But if you guys agree with what I'm saying, you can live with makes and misses if the process is good. Because over the course of the year, if you are winning in the process, eventually you will figure something out. But there's two simultaneous problems with the Fever. And it's something that I said was going to happen at the start of the year.
The addition of Lynn Dunn as senior advisor, a figure that with WNBA championship pedigree and long-standing Indiana roots, is seen as further insulation. Supporting that interpretation is a podcast appearance Dunn made 2 days before the reports surfaced. On a small program called The Daily Coach, Dunn spoke about organizational culture, values, and the difficulty of making tough decisions involving star players. She told a specific story about removing a high-profile player from a roster for academic reasons, noting the player couldn't stand her at the time, but returned years later to express gratitude. The host of the podcast immediately followed by raising the scenario of a coach weighing their moral responsibility to a team against the pressure created by a star player. Neither Clark's name nor the Fever was mentioned directly.
It was going to happen at the start of the year, in March. You have got gritty, ISO-heavy Kelsey Mitchell, who, by the way, had to adjust her game for Caitlin Clark in 2024. Kelsey Mitchell is pre-Caitlin Clark Kelsey Mitchell again. That is who she is. That is what she wanted to be. That is who she is. The Kelsey Mitchell, that is this off-the-ball specialist, does not exist anymore. 500 through 20 games while they're caught between up-tempo CC style and the gritty ISO ball. Someone said,
The framing was unmistakable. The commercial argument for keeping Clark in Indiana is significant. The franchise was drawing roughly 500 fans per game before she arrived. That number jumped dramatically with her presence, and a trade would effectively eliminate the fan base she brought in. That group has little attachment to the organization, independent of Clark, and would have no particular reason to remain. Recent attendance and engagement metrics have also fueled the narrative.
CC style and the gritty ISO ball. Someone said they were 5-8 with a hurt 8-5 with a hurt Caitlin. What am I doing here? They won 5 straight games, also made the finals aside. Doesn't suit Caitlin Clark. Steph Wise made clear she doesn't like risky basketball. Why do you think she will 180 on the playoffs and give Caitlin the keys? Not saying will, I'm saying they'll be better than 520 games in. I don't think they will. That play style because Caitlin wasn't an option. People are dumbasses. They think Steph White doesn't believe Steph White believes in her coaching. That's not a flaw in the coach. She believes in her coaching. Thank you so much.
A Clark three-pointer, The Fever, posted to social media after a recent game, drew 140,000 views in approximately an hour, a number that would have reached several million at the peak of her prominence. Empty seats were visible at a home game against the Atlanta Dream that featured Angel Reese and represented a marquee matchup on paper. The argument that the Fever have diminished Clark's value rather than amplified it has gained traction. The NBA's historical pattern of steering franchise-level talent toward Los Angeles has been raised as relevant context. Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Shaquille O'Neal, and LeBron James all eventually landed in Los Angeles. The NBA's oversight of the WNBA makes a similar effort to move the league's biggest attraction to its largest market. A logical extension of that approach.
That's not a flaw in the coach. She believes in her coaching. Thank you so much, DAJ, for the membership. Caitlin Clark going rogue is the only way that this team looks good with Caitlin Clark on the floor. And then with Caitlin Clark off the floor, they come, like when Caitlin Clark's not on the team at all, they like this, when Caitlin Clark is not on the floor.
A deal, if it materializes, would likely involve Kelsey Plum returning to Indiana as part of the compensation package. Any official denial from Stephanie White, Lynn Dunn, or team management would be expected regardless of the plan status. The financial and public relations fallout from confirming the move before it is completed would be enormous. Trading Clark would immediately become the largest transaction in WNBA history and would generate a response.
Like this, when Caitlin Clark is not on the floor and not in the game, they don't ever rely on Caitlin. It becomes, every single player on the team knows. If Caitlin Clark, thank you so much for the $5, Vic. This game's very hard to watch, I agree. Everybody knows. If Caitlin Clark's not there, you're not playing up-tempo, you're playing gritty, ugly basketball. And they all get used to that. But when Caitlin's there, they're in this situation where it's like, oh, we don't know what we want to do. Do we want Kelsey Mitchell to run around in circles? Do we want Kelsey Mitchell to run around in circles and do nothing? Or do we want Caitlin to be the head of the snake? It feels like this is two players that are fighting against each other. Like, I'm sorry, Caitlin was on the floor for 35 minutes. Kelsey was on the floor for 33 minutes. How exactly is Kelsey Mitchell -8 and Caitlin +3? So how exactly is Kelsey Mitchell -8 and Caitlin's +3? So what does that mean? The likelihood is that Caitlin in the non-Kelsey Mitchell minutes is probably what, +10? It's probably +10 in the non-Kelsey Mitchell minutes. Like, in Caitlin's minutes without Kelsey. It is, for me, it's like they are fighting with, do they want to be the team they were in the playoffs last year? Or do they want to be the team that they were in 2024? They're fighting between that. And I think long-term, you've got to be. You have got to be. And I think long-term, you've got to be. You have got to be the team that was there in 2024. Why? Because in 2025, you were a sub-500 team who got lucky in the playoffs because other teams choked. It's a fact. You did not make it to the playoffs because you were good. You made it to the playoffs because you were good at dragging teams down.